With the partial government shutdown now at day 17, the president is adding two big events to his schedule this week. Tomorrow, he is going to be making a primetime address to the nation from the Oval Office for the first time. And then on Thursday, he visits the Texas border. This as he seeks to highlight border security and press Democrats for wall funding. Joining us now is Republican pollster Chris Wilson. So, Chris, polls show the president is still behind on the issue of the wall. Not by much. I mean, it's very close. A Fox News poll shows 53% oppose the wall, 47 are in favor. It's going to be a tough sell, but do you think tomorrow's address could do it?
Well, I think the wall has kind of become synonymous with Donald Trump at this point. It's a good issue for him. It's a good issue for his base. But whenever Democrats and independents hear wall, they just think Donald Trump. If conversely you make, and the president makes it about border security, and what is, by all accounts, a relatively modest request for funding for border security, and then makes it about the Democrats who are not willing to fulfill that modest request for border security, then yeah, I think it does work out well for him. And that's a winning issue for him. And it's one that he can ride right into a 2020 general election.
And if we're going to just follow up on that in terms of you're saying that the border funding, yes, 3.7, but if you've seen all of the interviews with Nancy Pelosi and you're seeing all the Democrats speak, they don't seem to be really talking about giving a penny to this wall. Do you think it really revolves around immigration reform and the fact that DACA needs to move forward?
Well, it's a good point. I think what that means, what you bring up is really the question is whether or not you can have a compromise. Can you find the Democrats to give up for the request to give up some sort of funding for border security, whether it's for the wall or whether it's for some sort of other system, whether it's for concrete or metal slats, whatever it is, and in trade for that for DACA or other aspects of what Democrats are looking for. And if that's the case, then if they pass something out of the House and then the Senate would immediately take it up, and I think it'd be an easy compromise to make. And that is why I think this is really comes down to Democrats look as if they're standing between the president and what, again, I would argue is a modest request for border security. And whenever it becomes about that and Democrats stand in the way of border security, then that is, again, a winning issue for the president.
But he's saying this is a crisis. He is saying this is a crisis. The president has said that, the government workers that are laid off, former presidents, the landowners who are going to be subject to eminent domain, they all want the wall. But it sounds like the polling doesn't really indicate that most people, it's kind of half and half. Why is it that the president believes this is such a crisis, but statistically, at least historically, this just doesn't seem to be the case?
Well, again, you're talking about, I think it becomes a little bit about semantics. Are you testing it as a wall or are you testing it as border security? And I can take you specifically to Texas, where I do work for both the governor and Senator Cruz there. We did focus groups around the state. And the closer we got to the border, the more support we found for increased levels of border security and, in fact, a wall. Now, the language of a wall has become it's sort of inflammatory in its sense. But if you roll that back and, again, make it about a request for border security and making sure that you don't have illegal immigrants flooding across the border, bringing in drugs, that is whenever you really find the president has a winning message.
So
Hi,
sorry,
Chris,
go ahead,
Morgan. Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I thought was interesting over the weekend is Senator Graham made what I thought was a good point whenever he said it's very difficult for the administration to negotiate with the Democrats because you're negotiating with people who, it's not that they don't want a wall. They don't want ICE down there at all. They want to abolish ICE. I mean, the rhetoric that we're hearing from the base of the party is very extreme. You saw Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez call herself a radical on these issues. You see the border police demonized, called racist, told that they shouldn't have jobs. So how do you even begin to negotiate with people that have taken such extreme views from what the Democrat Party had just even 5 and 10 years ago?
Well, I think that you have to find elements of the Democratic Party that don't feel that way. I will tell you there are a lot of Democrats elected office in Texas and other border states that do not feel the same way that Andrea Ocasio-Cortez does, and doesn't feel that ICE agents and those who work in border security are somehow doing something nefarious. And that's really the key aspect. I think it becomes incumbent upon the president and Republican leadership to begin to divide out those Democrats who are sensible and have a more reasonable aspect or attitude when it comes to border security. And once they can do that, they'll begin to separate out the more radical elements of the Democratic Party from those that know that it is important that we reach some level of consensus here, that we do reach an agreement that allows the president to get the funding to complete his goals of trying to stop the flooding of drugs and illegal immigrants across the border.
Chris, when the Republicans won the election, the Democrats did their autopsy, as you know, and one of the issues that really so resonated for Trump with voters was the immigration issue. It was a huge winner, according to Democrats, pollsters and political consultants. And it just seems to me that Pelosi, the last thing Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats want the 2020 election to be about is immigration, because it's a losing issue for them. And yet Pelosi seems she's playing a winning hand here. How do you see it?
Well, Steve, you're right. I think that is one of the things that you saw Democrats run away from. And in fact, those Democrats who did take radical stance on things like abolishing ICE, for the most part, those that were around border states ended up losing. And so you found sensible Democrats like Kyrsten Sinema, who maybe took a little more reasonable position, were able to win their elections, whereas you had those like a Beto O'Rourke who ended up losing because they went so far left on it. And the key aspect here is the Democratic Party going to embrace that element, that more radical element in which they do not believe there should be any border security, there should not be any borders at all, and we should just allow anyone to come across the border. And I don't think that is where, well, look, I can tell you as a pollster, that is not where most Americans are, and it's really a problem for the Democratic Party if that becomes their face and their base issue.
Chris, I thought it was very powerful when we saw those border agents with the president last week. And I mean, if you've got to believe between two renditions of what's happening in the border, one by Nancy Pelosi that essentially we don't need a wall, and one by Border Patrol agents who put their lives on the line that we do need a wall.
Right.
I take the latter. Do you think the president's going to kind of double down on that message?
Well, I think he will. Yeah, absolutely. I think he will. And I think most Americans are right where you are, that they take the latter. And that's really the challenge. Is Nancy Pelosi comes from a position in San Francisco where they don't have real immigration challenges. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, a young lady lost her life there not too long ago to a illegal immigrant. But having said that, they don't have the same challenges that, say, San Diego does, or that El Paso does, or Tucson does. And those are the key differences here, because you bring out and are able to bring in those experts, those border agents who understand the aspects and the differences in the level of crime that has decreased, where you have had a wall be built in El Paso and Tucson and San Diego, where you've seen crime come down by over 90% in each one of those areas. And so that, to me, is them standing up and being that third-party advocate and saying, yes, what the president is asking for is reasonable. By all accounts, comparatively, it's modest, and it is something that has been proven to stop the influx of drugs, crime, and illegal immigration. And as Steve pointed out, that was a real winning position for Donald Trump in 2016. And frankly, I think with a strong economy, it is a winning position for him moving into 2020.
Chris, great to see you. Thank you very much. We got to move on, but appreciate you coming in.
You bet.